The Nike Vomero Plus versus the Asics Superblast 2. Two shoes that come from very different design intents but end up kind of doing the same thing. I have to admit, at first I wasn't going to do this video because even though I keep comparing this shoe, the Nike Vomero Plus, to this shoe, the Asics Superblast 2, and at least how they run and the performance that's in this shoe and how it matches to this shoe, I just didn't feel like this was the best comparison to do on this channel. I actually think that the new upcoming Asics Mega Blast, as you see here, will compare much more directly to this shoe, the Nike Vomero Plus, and I plan on doing that video next month. However, you can't deny that this shoe, the Asics Superblast 2, is and has been the gold standard for truly max cushion long run trainers. Now, I've talked a lot about on this channel that how Asics intended this shoe to be essentially a marathon training tool. Think of this shoe more as a Metaspeed without a carbon fiber plate and a wider contact patch to give more stability for athletes who need a shoe for a long run in a marathon build that has marathon pace in it but don't want to do that in a plated shoe. That's what this shoe is. It's not intended to be an all-around daily trainer. I know plenty of people use this shoe as a daily trainer, and if it works for you, great, but that's not what Asics intended this shoe to be. And that's the other reason why I just didn't see comparing these two shoes directly head-to-head in a versus video. However, the more I've run in the Nike Vomero Plus, the more I've realized that this shoe truly has the performance in it, and Nike seems to be really going after this shoe, the Asics Superblast 2. So let's get into it. And as always with my versus videos, let's start with the specs. Now, the only spec these two shoes really share in common is the stack height, though the Asics Superblast 2 has 2 more mil of foam in the forefoot, mostly because it has an 8 mil drop as opposed to the 10 mil drop in the Vomero Plus. Though the reality is the drop in both these shoes feels around 8 mil. It could feel a little less depending on how you weight the shoe, especially in the softer Nike Vomero Plus. The weight of the Superblast 2 is considerably lighter, and you do notice that on foot. Just goes to show you how lightweight such a big shoe like the Asics Superblast 2 actually is. Asics did a great job with that. But as you see, both these shoes, the pairs that I own, come in a little bit under the spec weight from the manufacturer. Fundamentally, both these shoes are very simple shoes. A simple engineered mesh upper, a single foam midsole, no plate, no shank, no carrier foam, nothing like that, though the Asics Superblast 2 does have a secondary layer of foam close to the ground, so it's FF Turbo Plus for the most of the midsole, and then there's a small layer of FF Blast Plus Eco below that, but I wouldn't really call that a carrier foam. That's more there just to give a softer foot feel on the initial strike. It's not doing the job of a carrier foam. But what really surprised me, and I didn't notice this until I compared these two shoes directly, especially looking at this image, is that the rocker profile in both these shoes is very similar. I described it as an aggressive forefoot rocker in the Nike Vomero Plus and a pronounced forefoot rocker and heel bevel in the Asics Superblast 2. But fundamentally, they feel and look like they're almost identical. It's almost like Nike was using this Asics Superblast 2 as a benchmark to figure out what the rocker profile of the performance-oriented Nike Vomero Plus should be. The ride profiles of these two shoes are very similar. I'm giving two different names to kind of the same feel. Resilient in the Nike Vomero Plus, energetic in the Asics Superblast 2. Though the ZoomX foam that's in the Nike Vomero Plus is softer and you do feel more resilience in that foam. So you do have more sink and you have more pronounced energy return, where the Asics Superblast 2 FF Turbo Plus does give you that. The FF Blast Plus Eco sort of dulls it out just a tiny bit. But given that FF Turbo Plus is a firmer foam with a high resilience, there's less sink and the shoe engages more of the roll because it is a firmer, stiffer shoe overall. Let's move to the contact patch and outsole of these two shoes. And there is another surprise here for me, given how close these two shoes are as far as dimensions. I've always considered the Asics Superblast 2 a very wide shoe, especially on the contact patch. A lot of that is to give that shoe stability, and you do feel that. The Superblast 2 can feel quite bulky, especially at slower speeds, or when you really get above marathon pace. It's just a big shoe. It always feels like a big shoe, but it's there to give you stability. The Nike Vomero Plus is actually a lot more nimble on foot. Some of that is the better resilience and the more energetic ZoomX foam, but also I think the slightly narrower waist in that shoe gives you just a little bit more nimbleness. The stability isn't quite as high on the Vomero Plus, but you are, I think, getting a little bit more nimble, aggressive feel on foot than the very stable but kind of bulky, sometimes feeling Asics Superblast 2. And comparing the outsole of these two shoes, it's kind of not really a fair comparison. I think the outsole on the Nike Vomero Plus is one of the best outsoles that Nike's done in some time. That darker inner piece of rubber with the rails on the outside of it give you a very compliant feel to the ground, but you're getting full rubber protection across the foam. There is exposed foam, but it's well hidden underneath the waffles of the outsole. It's just a outsole that you can really run on anything and it'll give you a really nice compliant feel. Very similar to what Asics is trying to do on the Asics Superblast 2, but there's just a lot more exposed foam there. And that's been one of the complaints of the Superblast and really just any Blast shoe is how much exposed foam is on the outsole. But I will say in the Superblast 2, I never have really had an issue with the exposed foam on that. It's kind of why FF Blast Plus Eco is there, just to give some more durability and all that exposed foam. But overall, from a grip standpoint, the Superblast 2 works just fine. I've had no issues with it. But if you're going to be running it on gravel roads, dirt roads, any kind of really abrasive surface, you're definitely going to notice that. Where in the Nike Vomero Plus, you're probably going to have no issues whatsoever. Starting with the uppers on these two shoes, they're both training fits. They're both on the performance side of training. They both give good lockdowns, but they get there in very different ways. In the Nike Vomero Plus, you have a 2-layer engineered mesh upper. There is a soft cyclock booty inside close to the foot, and then outside there is a fine engineered mesh that has no stretch to it that really contains the foot. The net result is a very soft, compliant feel to the foot, but there's no give in this upper, but it is a generous fit, so there is a lot of comfort in this, but there's also a lot of performance. There's a good lockdown in the shoe overall. Whereas the upper on the Asics Superblast 2 is a very traditional engineered mesh. Big change from the original Superblast, which had a much more stripped down race-like upper. This is a more traditional training upper. It's got overlays where it needs it, especially in the toe box. It's got some reinforcement in the eyelet chain. And, you know, it really does a job. It's a simple training upper that's very breathable, and it really works quite well. A big upgrade in my mind from the original Superblast, and I liked the upper on the original Superblast. Both these shoes have a lot of padding around the ankle collar and the Achilles flare. There's a deep pocket there to hold the heel in. The tongue on the Nike Vomero Plus is very thick, very padded, whereas the tongue that is on the Superblast 2 is very minimal. It's almost like just a thin piece of neoprene. But as far as lace bite and lockdown in both these shoes, they both work extremely well. Moving to fit and sizing of these two shoes, I've already said in this video that both of these, while they are a training fit, they're definitely more performance oriented. If you like a more generous fit, that's the Nike Vomero Plus, especially around the base of the eyelet chain and in the toe box. There's just more volume here, where the Asics Superblast 2 is considerably lower volume and a little bit more performance oriented. Not race oriented, just more performance oriented, which makes total sense given what this shoe is intended to do. From a sizing standpoint, I went true to size, US men's size 9 in both these shoes. However, I do think the Asics Superblast 2 is just a little bit longer. It's also a little bit more torpedo shape. It's a little bit narrower. It's a little bit more pointy in the actual tip of the shoe. Now, neither one of these shoes are what I would call a wide shoe, though Nike is now making a wide version of the Vomero Plus, which was unexpected, but that's good for wide-footed runners. And if you do have a wide foot and you don't want to go to a wide shoe, I think the Nike Vomero Plus is going to be the one that's going to be a little bit easier to kind of work your foot into, even if you go up half a size. Whereas in the Asics Superblast 2, this is a narrow fit. It's a classic Asics fit, and you just kind of have to work around it. Though I will say that the engineered mesh upper of the Asics Superblast 2 will stretch and accommodate, but the one thing you want to keep in mind with the Asics Superblast is you do not want your foot wrapping over the edges of the shoe at all. You want to make sure your foot is on this midsole and not spilling over this midsole, because it will be very, very uncomfortable if that's the case. And lastly, something I need to talk about with shoes that have this much foam in them is stability. Between these two shoes, the Asics Superblast 2 is by far the more stable option. It's the firmer foam that's wider, especially in the midfoot, that's just going to give you a more stable option. However, there is a lot of care to put as much stability into the Nike Vomero Plus as they can in this very soft ZoomX foam. There's a lot of material built up around the heel and the midfoot. There's a big, what I call bucket seat in my review for this shoe, link in the description, around the heel. So there's a lot of foam built up around the heel to stabilize the actual heel in the shoe. And again, create a bucket seat back there. And there is some width and some heel flaring in this shoe to give it as much stability as you can. But again, the Asics Superblast 2 is going to be just the more stable option. It does have a lot of foam around the heel, not as much as what Nike did with the Vomero Plus, but this shoe is definitely the more stable option, especially for a heavier runner, again, because the firmer foam in the shoe is going to hold up much better for that and it's going to deform less. I would consider the Asics Superblast 2 very stable, especially for how much foam is in this, and I would consider the Nike Vomero Plus stable enough given how soft and responsive this foam is, but it's definitely on the wobbly end. But again, wobbly in a shoe is something you can train for. You can build the stability in the foot and the lower leg to actually work well with the shoes, so I don't really see the problem in the stability with either one of these shoes. Moving to the ride of these two shoes and starting with the Nike Vomero Plus, the whole reason I'm making this video is because when I was running in this shoe, especially running at steady into threshold paces around marathon pace, the only shoe I could think of to compare this to was this, the Asics Superblast 2. The feel of these two shoes is very different. The Nike Vomero Plus is a much more bouncy shoe that's using both the rocker in the forefoot of the shoe to roll you forward, but then the resilience of the foam, the sink and the bounce, standard ZoomX feel to really propel the shoe forward, where the Asics Superblast 2 is really just using the roll of the rocker in the forefoot. That's what I was saying initially, is that these two shoes have very similar rocker profiles in the forefoot, and you do feel that, but you feel the more bounce and resilience out of the ZoomX foam in the Nike Vomero Plus, where the FF Turbo Plus foam in the Asics Superblast 2 is high in resilience, but you just don't notice as much because you don't sink into it as much as you do ZoomX. So the net effect is that the Superblast 2 feels more rolly moving forward, where the Vomero Plus just feels more bouncy and energetic going forward. The added stability in the Superblast 2, I think, actually makes it feel like it's going more rolling forward. It's much more stable, much more controlled rolling forward, which makes sense given that this is meant to be a training tool for marathoners to really save their legs in those long runs where they need to do pace. Where in the Nike Vomero Plus, this is a shoe intended for a lot more types of running. It can do that performance running for a marathoner in a marathon build, doing your long run with pace, but you can do a lot more in this shoe. And that really is the key difference between these two shoes. I know a lot of runners use this shoe, the Asics Superblast 2, as a daily trainer, especially heavier runners or runners who just want a lot more foam underfoot. But at the end of the day, the Nike Vomero Plus is going to be a much better all-around daily trainer. I've talked a lot about how I don't really like this shoe for really easy runs, like an easy recovery shuffle. Again, I think the geometry and the foam of this shoe is just too performance-oriented, but that doesn't mean this shoe can't do it. I think a lot of use cases of how people are using the Asics Superblast 2, not how Asics intended it to be used, but how people are actually using it, the Vomero Plus is going to be a much better option for that because it's just a much better all-around trainer. Some of that is the comfort of the upper, the more generous fit, but also the more dynamic and resilient foam that's actually in this shoe. This is the daily trainer that I think a lot of people wanted to make the Asics Superblast 2. But that's also why I actually think the better comparison will be the Nike Vomero Plus with, again, this shoe, the Asics Mega Blast, because that's exactly what Asics is doing with this shoe. The Mega Blast is they're trying to make that max cushion all-around daily trainer for those who wanted the Superblast to do that, but actually need a shoe that's a little bit more all-around, a little bit softer, much better for slower running. That's exactly what the Mega Blast is. But comparing these two shoes, I'm going to say that if you've always liked the feel of the Superblast 2, but you just wanted something that's a little bit softer, a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more resilient, but still does everything this shoe does, that very much is the Nike Vomero Plus. Another way of seeing everything I just said is with my performance matrix. So if we take the Nike Vomero Plus and the Asics Superblast 2, we put them both on here, this is what we get. As you can see, a ton of overlap. The big difference here is that the Asics Superblast 2, I think, has a much narrower range. I just do not think it is a good all-around daily trainer for most runners. It's definitely not what Asics intended it to be. Again, that's why the Mega Blast exists now. But as far as how these shoes handle steady into threshold running, they do it really, really well. Because the Nike Vomero Plus is just a little bit more focused on all-around daily trainer, I think it can do easy running. I think that real slow recovery shuffle, super easy stuff, it's not the best shoe. It's never the shoe I'm going to reach for first for that. It will do that. I've done plenty of it in the Nike Vomero Plus, but I think the Nike Vomero Plus comes more alive in easy into steady, definitely steady into threshold. Steady into threshold is exactly where the Superblast actually likes to be. As far as the top end of both these shoes, I think it's the same. Once you get above, say, half marathon pace, I don't want either one of these shoes. I think the roll of the Superblast 2 and the roll plus bounce of the Vomero Plus, I think both will work extremely well, but once you get, again, above half marathon pace, I just think they're too much shoe. They're just too bulky. I want a very different type of shoe for that faster running. But again, for long run trainers or even a daily trainer that can do long run training, especially for a marathon build, both these two shoes are excellent options. And the fact that the Nike Vomero Plus has so much overlap with the wonderful Asics Superblast 2 is really a compliment to the Nike Vomero Plus. As I said, I will be back doing a versus video between the Nike Vomero Plus and the Asics Mega Blast because I do think that is truly the head-to-head matchup of both Asics and Nike, what they're intending a big max cushion trainer to do that can do pace but can do everything else as well. And in the spring, I will be back probably to do a versus video between the Nike Vomero Plus and the Asics Superblast 3 because there's some big foam changes coming to the Superblast next year, and that could change the outcome of these two shoes. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you want to support what I do here, check out sagasurunning.com for merch or click the join button below. Neither one of those options are good for you. Leave a comment, leave a like, because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.